All right, we're live now.
All right, cool.
Everybody, welcome to Unlocked.
What's good, folks?
First real
How y'all?
episode where we'll discuss Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm going to post a link in the comments that y'all. All right, we're live now.
All right, cool.
Um, Zach, if you have the video pulled up, make sure it's muted on YouTube because I
Oh
just
yeah,
mine.
I just did, bro. I was making sure that didn't happen. All right, so we got 6 folks watching. You want to start off talking about how we gonna do this?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start. I just want to get that link in there. I should be able to pin it. All right, so you want to explain it, or you want me to go ahead and do it?
Okay, so for the ones that are watching right now, if you actually want to join in on the call, like how you see us right here, just go ahead and click the link that Jalen just posted in the live stream chat. It should be on the right side of your screen where it says streamyard.com. Uh, we are not necessarily talking about the entire book, correct?
Correct. We're gonna try to hit on that first half of the book because I feel like a lot of people haven't, finished the whole book, and this way we won't have to rush through discussing because there's actually a lot to talk about.
Right. Yeah, although it is a short book, it's easy to have a full day's worth of a conversation about this book.
Um, yeah. So if y'all want to join in the discussion here with me and Zach, and have some type of input this way, you can click the link that I just put into the chat from the Unlocked page. And there's also a link in the caption of the video. So if you click one of those, it should take you into a StreamYard studio. And from there, I can add you guys into the stream. So how we kind of envision this working is we can only have 10 people in the studio at a time, and we can only have 6 people discussing. So we'll bring in our first 6 people, and we'll get people to share a part of the book that they felt like they connected with. So maybe something that you had a question about, maybe something that you related to personally, maybe something that you just wanted to hear somebody else's thoughts about. So if there's something in the book that in that first chapter that you related to, feel free to come in here and share it and get other people's opinions. As people start funneling into the StreamYard, to give people a chance, we'll try to add new people in and, just mix up the conversation a little bit.
Yeah. So for the ones that you want to go ahead and like start talking, discussing the book.
Yeah, let's give people a couple minutes. Maybe if a couple more people want to get into the chat. I see we have Marcus here. Go ahead and add him in.
Yeah, yes, sir. What's up? Appreciate it, y'all.
What's up,
What's
man?
good, bro?
I'm good, bro. Man. Hey, I'm no lie. I read this whole book. Like, let me make sure I be prepared.
Yeah.
But it is a lot to talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, listening to this book sometimes, I don't know. I had kind of went through my whole like, I don't know, kind of real saddened phase about everything. But it actually was a little more encouraging than it was like depressing in some senses because it was bright sides of it too. So.
Okay. You mind elaborating on the positive side of it? What was encouraging?
I don't know if I can stay specific to chapter 1, but just about, I mean, even the whole undertone of the book is about him talking to his son and basically trying to equip his son for the world that he lives in, So it's like, there's always hope. You always want to hold on to hope for the future and like have your child have a better future than you, your child be better than you. They understand things earlier. Like, dang, that wasn't in chapter 1, but basically him hoping for his child to be better and do better. And that's the whole tone of it. And And then the way he spoke about things, like I don't know if it's poetic, but he used a lot of like metaphors and analogies. Like I remember him talking about that neighborhood over there is a whole nother galaxy. Like I'm like, bro, what are you talking about?
I really like that analogy, honestly.
Yeah.
I think his work is really poetic, and I think that's part of the fun in me rereading this book, because I've read this book before, but in rereading it, I'm trying to focus a lot on like what specifically is that message that he's trying to send to his son.
Mm-hmm.
And, trying to get a good understanding of that, so when that time does come for me, maybe I can have an understanding of that and pass down what I feel like is important.
Yeah. I feel as though for us as Black Americans, if you have a ancestry that of people that have been enslaved in the past, I feel as though it's important to have books like this, because if you just focus on the U.S., you
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily have like a blueprint of like being a Black man in America. Like nobody really gives you a blueprint or something that's just like, all right, bro, here, like this is what you're gonna have to deal with. Like this
Like
is
a
what you.
Bible guide almost.
Yeah, you don't. You have you hear about the American dream, but you don't realize that's their dream.
Yeah.
Like, and that dream was built off of your past, like your family's labor, work, stress, terror, horror, like all it is. You don't realize that until, at least for me personally, I didn't realize that until high school maybe. And like it's like I got little touches of it in middle school. Like I remember being in the Boys and Girls Club, and a great mentor there brought out the Willie Lynch letter to us. And it's like you get exposed to stuff every now and then, here and there, but it doesn't fully click all together. Like, why is this important to me? Until you actually in the world, and then you're like, dang, between the world and me, like what's about to happen? Like, you know?
Yeah.
I think this book serves as like a great introduction into that world, into like figuring out how does like this violence, for me, one of the things that he connects very well in the first chapter is just how violence and fear continue to like replicate each other in America. So like how does violence from cops translate to violence from your parents? And I think he does a great job in creating that vision, like making that apparent. Because for me, this book was eye opening in that sense of really translating the violence of America to like the violence that Black people see in their homes, like how it comes from the top down.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel like he does connect the violence from, well, really from like the history of America all the way up into right now, even in the suburbs and within like the low income, the poor communities where it's Black on Black or whatever it may be. He does a lot of that. Like he explains it to you in a way you're like, man, I didn't think of it that way, but you kind of understood it already,
Right.
but you didn't really draw the dots as well as he did. So I feel like he did a lot of that for me. I forget what quote it was. I don't want to say nothing that's outside of chapter 1 and mess it up, but
Yeah.
I'm personally cool with you just throwing something. Like we really gonna focus on chapter 1, but hopefully it'll whatever you say might spark somebody's interest of, okay, well, let me see what's in chapter 2, or let me see what's
yeah, I think that the hypocrisy of American exceptionalism and heroism.
Yeah. That's another crazy thing, man. It's like we talk about how great we are, or at least we're educated on how great we are, or trained to believe that. And next thing you know, you grow up realizing these injustices are occurring, and it's like, dang, are we that great? Like, have we been the good guy? Like, I really related to Joker. Did y'all watch Joker, the movie?
The new one?
Yeah,
I've seen it.
I needed that. Like, I didn't know I needed it at the time.
Oh,
I thought it was the fun loving, like Prince of the City Joker and everything, right?
Yeah.
But you realize by the time you get to the end of that movie, you're like, dang, he wasn't really a bad guy. He just got screwed over by society, and he's just a reflection of society. And then you realize the people that are there, like the people that's in the streets, they love Joker. They're like, finally, somebody stepping up to the people that are oppressing us.
Yeah.
And then I sit there and think, I'm like, oh shit, I've been rooting for the bad guy.
Right.
Like,
He the same kind of villain. He like Killmonger. Like you rooting for
Yeah.
Killmonger because you understand like how it feels to be oppressed and like you want to take over. You want to do things, make things right.
Yeah.
Like in a certain point, people stop caring whether it's violent or not. It's just like, hey, we need to make something happen because this ain't working.
Exactly. I feel as though we're getting to that in society now, you know, where people are starting to say, like, we did this 5 years ago. You know, we did this such and such years ago.
Yeah.
And they keep calling it riots, but it's not a riot, it's a rebellion.
Yeah.
And it's like, you haven't solved the same thing that we talked about years ago yet. So
Yeah.
I want to touch on what you said, though, when you're saying it was like things that you already knew or
Mhm.
you already felt. But
Yeah.
like I love that about books in general, but especially this book, because it's like they find a way to articulate what you already were walking in. You already had this feeling and everything, but you didn't have those words that they gave us to articulate what exactly we were going through and whatnot. I love that about reading these type of books.
Yeah, me too. Or reading in general, but especially books that have depth to them. I feel like, you know, because a lot of books can be, you know, the same cookie cutter or whatever type deal. But I wanted to get back to what we were talking about earlier. You guys were talking about like you were talking about how you read the Willie Lynch letter. Somebody gave it to you, and you read it, and it got me thinking about like I don't know. When I was younger, I didn't really understand the world I lived in. Like my dad told me racism was a thing, but I didn't really understand my position, and it wasn't never explained to me like it was explained in this book. Like the only things I knew was to like be good when the police come by, and like when you walk in the store, make sure your hoodie not up. Like that's the one thing I remember from being like a teenager and young. Like these are certain things you just don't do. But I never, and just crime in general. But like I never really articulated it and understood it until I started listening to our stories more. And then like I got to college, like I think I experienced people like who do like the lady who walked by, she may not clutch her purse tighter, but she give you that lip.
Yeah.
Like, you make me nervous. I'm walking by you. I'm not trying to be rude. It was like I don't know. And then it just hurts too sometimes to hear the stuff like we tell each other, like, oh, you light skinned, you will be all right. Or, you know, it's like this is all a result of that same kind of attitude that we were like given this certain designation that's not really a factual representation of who we are as like in general. Like it's a made up thing in general. So
Yeah, I think Ta-Nehisi draws to that very nicely when he talks about how let me see if I can find it in the book.
you got no yes,
But I think he makes it evident that what does it mean that America doesn't want you to really understand like your position in this system, and like how do schools play a role in that? How do police play a role in that? And in that first chapter, I think the whole his whole dialogue about schools really talked to me because like how you're saying, it's like it was something that we were living in, but for some reason we didn't understand like why we were in that position, why those systems were in place. And we're going to these schools where they're supposed to teach us like history. They're supposed to teach us like, you know, they're supposed to prepare us for life. And they're not even, you know, really giving us an honest display of the life that we live in.
Yeah.
And, I feel like that's one of the biggest ways in which education fails like young black children. And he makes that really evident in a lot of quotes.
Yeah, I got some too. I don't know if you're done on that.
Oh, go ahead, bro.
Oh yeah. So one thing I think me and Zach talked about this a long time ago. I never really liked history. I almost failed history in school, and like I never knew why I didn't like it. but it's like because the stories weren't about me or us or in a positive light. The stories are skewed to show the history and the men that are important, and all the important men are white men, and those are the people who actually contributed something. And we glance over any significant African ancestry and accomplishments. And if most of the African stuff we do is talking about our oppression in America, when we were doing so much more before that, and even while we were going through that, we did a lot, So it's all, and the lens is like we are still the lesser in the history books of everything. And he talks about like the representation in the history books and the media and everything. We're all conditioned to see the white man. In general, he's the superior one. He's the one that's accomplished, and he's who we should aspire to be, at least throughout history. So he talks about that. What did he say? I got a quote too for that.
Glad you came with the quotes, bro.
No, yeah, it's a rough quote. I think I paraphrased this, but he was saying schools are about compliance, not. And I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense.
When he's talking about like a good student, how that doesn't mean just like doing well on your test, but it means like following in line, like
Yeah,
to your
that's gonna save your
teacher.
life or something. Yeah,
It is the school's disciplining you to act and behave a certain way.
Yeah.
bro.
And I think he ties that also in with like when he talks about the civil rights and Black History Month and how all of our heroes are nonviolent. If you want your freedom, these are the ways that you get your freedom, even though violence is used to keep you away from it.
Yeah. So we have to be better all of a sudden. Like,
Yeah. Now we got to be the
good guy.
the good guys, the bigger man.
Malcolm spoke on that, and a lot of our other heroes. For instance, I was watching a video with Dr. Ben. I think John. Dang, what's his name? John Jackson. Dr. John Jackson was in it, and they were just discussing on just when they were in church, and how they would look at all these pictures and everything, and they were like, "Wait, so it's nothing but white babies in heaven? Like, where's all the black babies at? Like, what happened to my people? Like, where'd they go?" And then you look at the Greek and Roman art, and anybody that's darker than white is the quote unquote demons.
Yeah.
Um,
Same thing with Disney too.
Exactly. It's going back to what y'all were talking about with the schools. I know one quote that he said was, I took it down. He said, schools did not reveal truths, they concealed them. And I was talking to my little cousin earlier. We had, every time I see my cousin, I hope he watches this one day. Every time I see him, he's in 8th grade right now, I grill him. I teach him about a credit card, debit card, why your credit score is important, how you can use a loan, like why you want to own your own business and all this stuff. Like, and I asked him, like, what do you know? What did they teach you in history? And he didn't know. He says they didn't really teach me much. He says that he doesn't know anything about Black people before being enslaved. And it's just like, where are our truths? And we have it in their minds. It's like our truths are irrelevant, or it's unimportant. Like, our truth isn't there at all. Like, going back to what people normally say, history, his story.
Yeah. I looked up some history too. I had to because I think I saw this first in Hidden Colors talking about like the fact that race it was constructed. It wasn't innate to our condition like for a long period of time. And then so what did she say? Haven said the hypocrisy of American exceptionalism and heroism. And I think she's kind of referring to this quote from the book. He says, domination and exclusion are essential to the idea of being white. So when he says that, he's really basing it off of the history. Where is the quote at? It says, I think the first use of the term race was used in like the 16th century or later in the late 16th century. But its original use was not how it's used today. It wasn't until the 18th century when it was really referring to like different classes of people. Like, these people are lesser than, those are the blacks or the slaves, and those are the lower class or something like that. So it was kind of like just looking back and seeing that there's a time period where they had to make the narrative something different, to basically get what they wanted out of the land and the money that they needed. So it's basically greed, and I feel like it's a little hate in there, but mostly greed that really pushed them to kind of create and go along with this narrative that race and separating people amongst classes was important and paramount.
Yeah. I'll say one person that Jalen put me on to, my favorite psychologist. I will consistently repeat this man's name. Amos Wilson, in one of his lectures, he says, you called, and he says Indians, we now say Native Americans, but he said, you called the Indians savages so you could treat them like savages. You call us criminals so you can treat us like criminals. Yeah. So I feel like that touches on what you just now mentioned. And you create that narrative, bro. Like, savages, like we aren't criminals. Like, you done said a herb can't even be you. It's like a flower. You made that a criminal. You criminalized a flower. You criminalized just being in general. Your life.
Yeah. The black body isn't. I think. What he does in this book too. He talks about how the black body is like worthless. Like, compared to what did he say? Safer is of higher value than justice. He's talking about a number of things where it's like the black body is the ultimate, like, it's the price you have to pay. Like, it's the price we paid to build this country, and it's the price we might have to continue to pay, like, if you want to be safe or whatever. Like, people are okay with black people dying. Like, that's what history has shown us. But I mean, the truth is that it's not okay, and that's the problem. Like, people, we've been conditioned to see this as a okay thing to do, though. Like, as something to experience and to be fine in America, just so the dream can live on.
Right, a dream.
Yeah, I like how Ta-Nehisi Coates plays with the idea, like you were saying earlier, of just white people like believing they're white, or like whiteness. He plays a lot with like whiteness being something that's created. Like, white isn't anything real, and in a way he kind of says that black isn't anything that's very real.
Right.
But one quote that I really like from him, and this is like very near the very beginning of the book, which is page 7 if you have the actual physical copy, but it starts I'm gonna just start where it says but race. So, but race is the child of racism, not the father. And the process of naming the people has never been a matter of genealogy and physiognomy so much as one of the hierarchy. Difference in hue and hair is old, but the belief in the preeminence of hue and hair, the notion that these factors can correctly organize a society, and that they signify deeper attributes, which are indelible. This is the new idea that the heart of these new people who have been brought up hopelessly, tragically, deceitfully to believe they are white. So I like how right there he also shows that whiteness is a construct. And in the same way that black people have been deceived to think lesser of themselves, white people are also kind of deceived through these same systems to, think of themselves as something greater. And I don't feel like in a lot of ways that he provides a lot of solutions, but I think in this next paragraph, he offers some type of solution. And he says, these new people are a modern invention, but unlike us, their new name has no real meaning divorced from the machinery of criminal power. So like whiteness doesn't even really mean anything if you take it away from violence and destruction. Like they're almost, it's one and the same. The new people were something else before they were white: Catholic, Coresian, Welsh, Mennonite, Jewish. And if all of our national hopes have any fulfillment, then they will have to become something else again. Perhaps they will truly become American and create a nobler basis for their myths. So I think that's him providing somewhat of a solution of how maybe, people need to detach away from this, system of whiteness and blackness and really come together as just, a people. But I just thought that was a great way for him to describe it, and it was interesting that he provided some type of solution there.
I actually I want to touch on Haven's question
Yeah, let's touch on some of these comments.
right there. When she asked, "When did you realize the fragility of the black body in America or in the world?" What's y'all thoughts on that one? Like, when did y'all actually realize that? I'm writing about mine.
Um, I think for me,
Uh,
I would want to say it was like in one of my first early contacts with the police in Athens.
mm,
And I would say that's probably like the most powerless I felt in my life. Um, I feel like I was wrongly arrested. Um, and for me, it was weird because I was arrested by a black cop along with some other white cops, and it was hard to see. I don't know. It was an interesting dynamic getting arrested by a black guy. I'll just say that. Um, but I began to realize that I didn't really have control over my like in certain ways. I don't really have control over my destiny, and as a black person, I'm not provided privileges other people may be provided in a situation with the police. That was I'm not going to provide too many details, but in that situation, I began to realize that. But what about y'all? And I just want to say this for the people watching. If y'all want to come in again, I know this is our first time doing this. If you want to come into the video and join in the conversation live, just hit the link below in the caption of the video, or there's a couple links also in the chat.
yeah, please do, because it helps with the flow of the discussion. In my personal opinion, instead of having to, I guess, wait on your question, you can present it as the conversation flows.
Mm-hmm.
But what about you, Marcus?
I really don't know. I feel like it was one of those news stories where it was just like that don't make sense. Like
Yeah.
I think in the book, I don't know when, where he speaks about the young man that was killed in, I believe, Florida for playing his music too loud. I think and I remember that, and I was just like, that's the most simple thing, but it doesn't require somebody being shot and killed over it. And even if he was, it's like the fact that you can get off scot-free for it, that's crazy. So it's just that, and it's been since then it's been like a repeated cycle. And I think the one that two that really hit home for me is my uncle, because he was arrested for something he didn't do, arrested and convicted. And that's a whole nother discussion. And then Mike Brown, because Mike Brown was shot at is like right in between the like two areas where most of my family lives at right now. So just like every time somebody mentioned Mike Brown, I'm like Mike Brown's my brother. Like my brother could have easily been driving around in that street or known somebody over there in Ferguson. I mean, Ferguson is St. Louis. Like, don't let people confuse and get it mixed up. Like Ferguson is in St. Louis, and that's how it is over there. Like, and when I go home, they have conversations about, oh yeah, I don't go up to St. Clair, St. Anne, or so and so, so and so. Them police don't play around. Like, and I see it. It's like I don't want to deal with the cops at all, because I understand. Like, one, we have this fear that's been in place to us because we know our history and know what has happened. But two is because we know it can happen again. It can happen to us, and we don't want to be on the news. So those are mine.
What you just said right there
Mm-hmm.
was actually something you can dissect a lot. For me personally,
Mm-hmm.
first you said the media. So for me, I think I realized that possibly in middle school. I think it's something that's it gets in your subconscious in elementary school. If for me personally, because I actually lived with my grandmother for a while, and it would always be the news. Like the news would always be on TV. So who do I see on the news all the time? Us. By the time I get into middle school, I'm sitting there thinking like, dang. Okay, like by middle school is when I first found Tupac. And when I add Tupac to what I'm seeing on the news, it all came together for me. And I was like, yo, they really out here killing folks. They make us look like we doing all the bad stuff. So in my mind, I just started doing the opposite of everything they showed on the media, bro. Like I honestly did not eat watermelon for like a good 2-3 years because I didn't want somebody in my area sitting there saying like, "Oh, there you go, black person love that watermelon." Like I would fried chicken at school, bro. I was eating a hamburger on the days that they had the chicken and everything. But you touched on two things as well, where you said Mike Brown is like your brother. Right before that, you touched on Jordan Davis. That's legit like my brother too. I actually knew him. We actually went to the same church, hung out. And I know his mom and everything. Like that was a very sad. So I'm happy that he did receive some sort of justice by the murderer actually being convicted and whatnot. However, that should have never even happened. You know, it just shows how fragile our bodies really are. Like they think it's okay to go around and like just because you have your music loud, like now I'm gonna go and shoot this up. Yeah, you can't do that. Like what you doing with your music loud? You know, like and you touched on how certain areas, you know, you can't go in. Like I was picked up on that as a child as well. There's certain areas in my grandma's area where she lives where I'm like, yeah, we don't go there. We don't stop at this gas station. We don't go past this street. Like this street, we don't stop nowhere in there. And I feel like all that cult like sums up or all that connects us as black people. Like all of us has a story like that. All of us have probably been related to somebody that's been murdered some way, somehow, whether you know it or not. I like how Chanel says she realized it in high school. I'm
You know,
happy people.
go ahead and finish.
I was just gonna say I'm happy that it clicks sometime for us. Like that cop that was in your situation, Jalen, it must not have clicked for them. So I don't know if they would have been in that position to have that power over you if it ever really did click for them, you know?
And you know, I think that it clicked for me in high school as well. And I forgot about this. I don't know why I didn't think about this, but I think Trayvon Martin was, you know, an incident that really like enlightened people in my age group. Like, you know, your body almost means nothing. Like somebody can wipe you off this planet, and you know, at that point in time, I was about Trayvon's age.
Yeah.
I remember my aunt even like messaging me and be like, you know, Jalen, he kind of looks like you. And I think that's one of the first times that I really started to realize. And then also right after that, a couple years later, you were talking about Mike Brown and Ferguson. I think those are events that I'll never forget. Like watching the Ferguson riots live on Twitter. I think at the time I was watching it, or it was on Periscope. But I think those are also very imperative moments in me realizing fragility of black bodies.
When did y'all quick question. When did y'all learn about Emmett Till?
Bro, we learned about that in school.
Yeah,
we learned about that early.
Where like what grade level do if y'all remember?
Probably 6th grade or something like that. Like not too early because no, we learned about it. That was 7th grade. I think we watched a documentary about it, but it didn't really hit home. You know, we have this perception, and white people use this a lot. Like, oh, that was back then. That couldn't happen now.
Right. It still does. Daily.
I don't think I really had a good understanding of the Emmett Till situation until college, man.
Mm-hmm.
I got a quote. Well, it's not necessarily a quote. I was paraphrasing from what he said, but he basically says like the killing of us by the cops and like black on black crime itself, all of the death and the killing is rooted in the assumed inhumanity of black people. So like the problem of when people say like Black Lives Matter, like that phrase should really address both issues, even though they're kind of separated and one is used to what's the word? Delegitimize the other. But like either way, Black lives should matter to everybody, including black people. But most of the time we're trying to get the point across that hey, like in this system, we're basically saying that it's okay to take Black lives away from the people who are supposed to be protecting all lives, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get that out.
Um,
You want to check out one of the comments?
yeah. So you want to let's hit Michael's question. How do you feel about him describing the idea of hope as being specious? Am I saying that right? What
Yeah,
is
let me
that word?
tell you what that means.
He hitting us with the SAT word. Superficially plausible, but actually wrong. That's what that means. So okay. Again, how do you feel about him describing the ideas of hope as being specious?
I get the question. I feel like one, this author's lens is different because he doesn't use like faith or anything to root him. Like he mentions like how the mother of Prince Jones, I think it's later in the book, but like how her faith in being able to be anchored and be calm, you know, and something else outside of herself, he couldn't understand. But like I feel like a lot of his stuff is really frank. Like he's talking about the black body because he feels like that's all he has. Like we are right now. So when he's talking about like the hope being like not really plausible, I get it from the standpoint of like I understand that. Like I don't think he's saying like I'm a pessimist, nothing's gonna happen. I think it's more so that given our history of like being manipulated and us giving a religion and then the religion being used to like pacify us and keep us calm, is that we can't have hope. We got to have action. We got to have like, you know, faith in our works. Like we have to actually do things to try to bring about change versus like just hoping and praying, you know, thoughts and prayers. Like people do a lot of thoughts and prayers, but you know, prayers require action too. Like it's a lot of things behind what he's saying. It's not just like, oh, you know, hope ain't worth nothing, you know.
Right.
So
I believe you might have caught one of my conversations. Hopefully he'll hop on this one day. He'll probably have a lot to say, a lot about stuff. But my conversations with him touch on just that right there, where I'll say like, for instance, Frederick Douglass quote where he's like, he prayed all his life, but then he started praying he didn't get that freedom until he started praying with his legs, you know. And I remember having a conversation with Hill, and I was sitting there like, I can't work off of hope because like hope gives me nothing. Like in my opinion, at the end of the day, like
in my opinion, hope is get us where we got now, where it's 400, 300, however many years you want to count, whatever point you want to start, we're in the same place. Like between the 60s and now, we really haven't made progress. It looks like it.
Exactly.
And you get a black president, they make you say, "Oh, you're in the clear now," but we really haven't gotten anywhere.
Yeah, Obama was, in a lot of people's opinion, tokenism, and then you had a lot of people saying like, yo, racism's over. You have a black president. We gave it to you. You got it. That's reparations. Like I think was it Mitch McConnell that said that's your reparations, the president.
I don't know about Mitch McConnell. Excuse my language.
No, we can use that. We can use that. Feel free, bro. You got your First Amendment right on here. How about you, Jalen? How do you feel about that hope?
Well, I think that Marcus made a distinction between hope and faith.
Yeah.
That, you know, it might be more useful if we have more faith rather than just hope. Hope is kind of like you were saying, it doesn't really have much action attached to it. And I think that, you know, hope is good, but we also have to be realistic about our situation, and we got to be doing things to, you know, to make things different. I don't think just hoping is going to change things.
Yeah. Like what you saying about realizing your situation, I think we got to realize our situation is dire. Like we can't hope anymore. Like we are the kids of people who are the kids of people who like have done and dealt with the same stuff. It's been going on for generations. The point is, so it's like, how many generations do you keep a cycle going and keep a pattern and a system going? It's like you don't change it. If your family was in if you had a toxic family and your family tree was messed up, you would want to break that in your family tree. But America's family tree started a long time ago, and it's been messed up for what 30 odd generations now.
Yeah.
Plus, so why can't we fix that now? Because if we keep passing the ball on a lot of stuff, it's not going to be much of America left.
Yeah, and I think that I think he talks about school, schools in that in being a cause for that, but also like even more than just schools, it's just how white supremacy operates, like under a
Yeah.
lie. And I
Yeah.
think people to like come to reality of these truths, like black people and white people. It's like, how long can white people come out here and go to say systematic racism isn't a thing? Or like how long can people say like, oh, our society is colorblind when it's clearly not? I think a lot of this is going to come with people like being aware of the problems in our society and actually owning up to them and actually making a change. Like we can't gloss over them how we've done for the past couple of years, 50
Yeah.
how many years,
The thing is though, it's like we again going back to when I asked you, Chapman, about like why you didn't like history and stuff like that, right? We touched on this before. We talked about we never really taught the lessons behind this history that's given to.
We don't teach values.
Exactly. You're not teaching concepts. You're teaching topics, really. And it's the part that gets me is that when you actually do dive more, again, shout out to you, Jalen, put me on the stamp. When you actually dive into history like that and dive in, like Ain't I a Woman has a lot of history in it. Like when you dive into these books that actually fully go into depth of what you probably should have gotten into school, but now you got to read in some 500-page book yourself. You actually start realizing like, oh dang, they've done this before. Like, oh dang, what I said today in 2020 was said in 1960s. Oh snap, it was said in 1920. Oh shoot, Frederick Douglass said this in 1800. Like you start realizing like, wait a minute, are we just going for the okie doke over and over? What exactly is what's the lesson that we gain? Like we haven't been taught the lesson to learn from this, like to because when you actually learn things in life, like your oldest teacher is trial and error. That's the oldest teacher of man, trial and error. So if I'm not learning my errors from the trials that we're going through, then what exactly is going on? Like we need what exactly do I need to learn needs to change from this point forward? Like since I know that the actions we're doing now has not worked in the past.
Bro, I watched. This is related. Hold on, I'm gonna bring this back. Hamilton release, right? I hadn't heard nothing about Hamilton, but they get into like the first act, and it's Alexander Hamilton meeting all these people, and they talk about the Declaration and all this other stuff. And I'm like, one guy talks about America won't be free until all the slaves are free, all the Africans are free. I'm like, who is this man? Because he the one I want to know about. Because all the other ones on that bull, like they talking about every man's created equal, so and so. Like they were not really on it. It's Lieutenant Colonel John Lawrence. So his dad was a slave owner, and then I think in a play he eventually dies. I guess he died in history too before everybody else lived on. So I think his vision of like setting all the Africans free, all the enslaved people free as well, died along with him. Alexander Hamilton didn't push that along, at least from the play or whatever. But by history, you can tell that didn't happen until 100 odd years later. So it's like the idea has been around since the birth of the nation that everybody should be free. That's really what the birth of the nation should have been like, but it didn't go that way.
Exact opposite, almost.
Exact opposite.
The fact that you just said
down on the the trouble.
Exactly. The fact that you said the birth of a nation, like, and they say that was like the first worldwide video, like the first premiere Hollywood was really giving out to the world to see of America, and that's like a whole century after like I think it's like maybe 50 years after slavery ended, but maybe like a whole century and some time since the birth of this nation and whatnot.
And it was crazy how it was still an accurate depiction of what America was and of its founding principles. Even 250 years later.
Yeah. Well, accurate to white America's view, at least, which
Yeah.
is
Those who
America.
believe they're white.
But yeah.
I think
Can you imagine that's the first thing you see when, like, let's say you've never experienced America. You don't even know. You just hear about it. You just hear it's this place across somewhere, and that's the first thing you see. Like, that's wild.
I mean, would it be an accurate representation? I feel like it could still almost apply now.
Accurate to someone's someone to a certain point of view, I'll say.
I think it's accurate because of, like, imagine being a person from Africa and being brought over here. That depiction of these terrorists coming and burning stuff and killing people is what you saw when you were grabbed and put on a ship. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's the same thing. Like I was saying earlier, this stuff has happened before. It just takes different forms. Like the mass incarceration, that was the daughter of the what's it called? The racist laws. Well, I can't think of the name right now. Jim Crow laws. Yeah, it's the same way to keep Negroes at bay and keep them cheap in labor, and you know what I'm saying. And then before that, it was slavery. So it's all different methods of the same madness. I like this quote. He talked about white folks. He said, "Folks that believe themselves white are obsessed with personal exoneration." And I think that's part of like our fatigue with dealing with people who come from a different background, who don't really understand. And then some people don't understand so much and they get so defensive. So immediately it's like, okay, like if you bring up racist to somebody and they're like, I'm not a racist.
Yeah.
And it's like, dang, like, dog, just hear me out. Like you claim you're a good person, but they're not willing to hear you out. And it's like, I guess it's the dream. Like they're trying to defend the dream. I think the hardest part about what he's talking about and like our lives in general is like realizing you're at the bottom and realizing the people at the top don't even know why they're at the top or how they got to the top. And they're afraid. Like people are afraid. And a certain part in this book, he talked about his mom taught him to interrogate himself, to question himself, to get to the root of things. So that way he can really see that he wasn't right all the time. And I think that's the hardest thing. I think that's part of our mission is to really help people realize and self-evaluate that, hey, maybe you aren't as good as a person as you think you are, or not even good as a person, but you aren't, your actions aren't lining up with what your beliefs are, what you think your beliefs are. Or maybe your beliefs are rooted in a lie. That's the hardest part of it. Hey, you believe in this American dream and you think it's for everybody, but it's really not.
Can y'all imagine? Okay, because I know y'all can imagine our side of it when you wake up and realize like, dang, the world's really not what I thought it was. But can you imagine living in that beautiful dream? You know, the one where it's like, oh, if I work hard, I got, I'll be a millionaire, I'll be fine. Everything I need is gonna be here. It's an abundance. I don't have to worry about poverty or depression. Like I don't even think about sexism. I don't think about any of these things. And then you realize that it's been beneficial to you and you've been perpetuating it. And like you really have a good heart. Like you really truly do have a good, like you just didn't know. Can you imagine realizing that something you do is really actually caused pain for an entire people?
I think I realize that now sometimes. Like when I think about, you think about things being sourced sustainably, like things like palm oil isn't really sourced sustainably, or like clothes that are made in sweatshops where people are making like pennies on the dollar, or children who are slaves in the Congo to get minerals for all of our cell phones and our technology. I think in some ways I go through that and realize that even some small things that I do support something that might disenfranchise somebody else. I got a question for y'all. Do y'all think that this entire Black Lives Matter movement, especially in the past couple of months, is beginning to wake white Americans up from this dream that Ta-Nehisi writes about in the book?
I hope so. Well, I hope so. I can't do nothing about that, but I mean, I guess we can work to educate people. And like, I feel like this is a platform to show people like us actually having a conversation, so that we don't have to go out of our own personal time throughout our day to do it, but we can sit down. They can look at this and say, hey, we're talking about this book. You can read this book. But I mean, the news says all these books are selling out about racism and blase blase. So I'm going to assume that people are educating themselves and that maybe they are asking those tough questions of themselves, but I'm not completely sure because I haven't talked to a ton of people. But I would assume that it is going in a better direction.
Assume that's a word that I talked about with my little cousin earlier too. I was like, you can't make. I told him that classic saying where it's like, if you assume, it makes an ass out of you and me. You know that saying. Yeah. But my question is, are people actually reading these books? Because I've actually given books to people and they haven't read them. You know, right. Like we're actually offering the PDF or the EPUB of the book. You know, you don't even have to go out and get it yourself. You literally have the technology to do it right here. And have you are people actually reading? Because it can be daunting looking at how many pages you actually got to read, and you actually have life at the same time. Where you know it's like, dang, where can I find 30 minutes to actually read this book? You know, where can I find this time to actually read this? And I see Haven put, I think it's possibly starting to make them question the dream. I see Mike put, I feel like it's more exposing who believes what than waking people up.
Yeah, I see what he's saying. It's like it's showing people like you showing your real colors when you acting out. Like Aaron Murray, like certain people do certain things like, okay, you showing your true colors, but certain people who have good intention, like, I'm sorry, I don't ask for much. Like if you showing that you're trying to have good intention, you think you're a good person, let's put that to the test. Like let's see how good of a person you think like you actually are.
I would say intentions are something that you need to throw out. Again, like going back to somebody that I recently really started to study is Kwame Ture, and where he says like revolution is scientific. So in scientific is based like you actually have to find some type of truth. You know, like you're actually trying to. It's not going off of something that you are assuming or something like that. So it's like I need to actually see, like your intention may be good, but if it's harming, then you need to switch that. You know, like I see your intention, but it's kind of like when, for instance, you as a male, you may not know what the words that you speak to a woman may come across as sexist or may offend them or may make them feel uncomfortable or make them feel as though they're harassed. And you have good intentions with what you say, with what you do, with how you move. But it's just the fact that you did not make them feel comfortable. You made them feel less than, or you made them feel like you were ostracizing, objectifying, or whatever. And that's what really needs to be dealt with, not necessarily the intention. So I like when you say like, let's put that up to the test. You know, like let's see what you actually about. I also see
opinion, man. I don't really. Most of the times, I think intent doesn't really matter. It's more of just like the action and the repercussion.
right.
That's what I think deserves the most focus in most cases.
Exactly. I see Chanel put out hope so, but I know for some going along with the movement is exactly it's a trend for them. It's about knowledge that they learn reading and having discussions too. I would love to see. I would actually love to bring on a person that's not a person of color onto the show. I know we have people that signed up and registered, but I actually want to see their opinions on it. It's like let's see you have this discussion. Right? Let's see how uncomfortable we can get to create change. You know, because that's the only way you can get change, to get uncomfortable.
I think most people aren't generally comfortable having conversations about race in general. Right. So hopefully what we're doing is opening up, the stage for people to feel comfortable talking about these things amongst people. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, I think part of our conversations about race and everything, well, he said people are obsessed with like exonerating themselves. One, But the other thing is like, what is the lens of your conversation? Is the focus, because if you're in an argument and you guys are not agreeing, are you guys focusing on the person being the problem? Or are you focusing on the issue being the problem? The
Right.
issue is the race or the belief in the race or whatever you're trying to address. If you can frame the conversation in that way, I think that may be a way to make it more comfortable for people to discuss it, versus like you talking about race and they just like, oh man, here this goes. I'm about to be like just scrutinized from this to that,
Mm-hmm. How do y'all feel about Agbor's comment right there? How this is kind of like when we touched on it being a trend. Like I feel as
Yeah.
though me, Agbor, and you guys are also agree. Like it is a trend. It feels as though a trend, because we've been talking about this for years, and y'all just not picking up on it, and it makes you feel good. So it's almost like them trips, the missionary trips, where you feel like you've done something for 2 weeks, and I'm a great person, I done helped out people, I done saved them, and now I go back home, and I'm back from my vacation. But this quote right here, where he's saying like, what about this long-term education? Like, what do y'all think? Y'all think people are actually gonna consider, like, for instance, how COVID was. At first, everybody's interested in learning about it and everything, but as soon as, for instance, like what Christine said in one of our previous discussions, as soon as they kind of felt like they were being oppressed by COVID and the recommendations or the requirements of like stay in your house, like, but you're being oppressed, you're being told what to do. Like, do you feel as though this would continue? Because we saw that they got tired of that pretty fast. Like the people that didn't believe it was a thing, they got tired. They actually went to like state official places with their weapons about COVID, about a pandemic. You went with guns for like, 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 what are y'all thoughts? Like, you're tired. If it's trendy, you get tired of it fast. COVID seemed like a trend too,
I hope not. Like we're saying, I hope. But hopefully people are just becoming more educated about ways that people are systematically oppressed and how they may be, contributing to that system. And hopefully that can create some change in the future in policy. But one thing I want to point out about that COVID thing is like, what does it mean that white Americans can go out and protest, wearing masks with guns and rifles and not, be attacked by police, but black people in the streets fighting for their lives
with no weapons,
are shot with rubber bullets and tear gas and made criminal by a certain part of America. I think that's an interesting conversation.
I think he addresses it. He's like, the police reflect America in all its will and fear. Like, police are doing what the dream requires to keep whatever people, what they hope for, what they've been working for their whole lives, to enforce it basically. And it's like, okay, whatever the cost is, if it's black bodies, then oh well, but like they better not cause trouble in my neighborhood. I'm scared. Like them people that walked out their house with that couple that walked out their house with a gun in St. Louis, like, I mean, they have a right to stand outside and like protect their home or whatever, but they cross the line too. But I don't really know that line. But brandishing a gun and like concealing a gun and protecting your home are two different things. So it's like there's a certain entitlement they have that comes along with being white. Like I can do this kind of stuff and get away with it, and that's the police are a part of that. So that's why they can protest in many different ways. And if you see the riots, like even with Ferguson, or anywhere, like you see the riots, you can see agitators. A lot of them are white people going out here, and they may not necessarily agree with the cause or whatever. They just may be out the house doing whatever. And I feel like during COVID, you see a lot of that. Like a lot of people just want to protest. Oh, that's outside. Like let me go out there and do that. They riding that way. But back to what we were talking about with the trend thing, I think as the people who are most being affected by this, I think it's our duty to like keep the talk and the discussion going and keep pushing the agenda, because yes, trends do happen, but trends can also turn into movements if we put things in place that make it give it longevity, versus like letting our voices die and letting like the truth die out with, you know, the next couple of months. I think continuing to having these conversations and publicizing it and putting it out there for people to see, because they're not going to get it from the media. The media is going to move on, but we got to put it out there to the friends of friends or the neighbors of neighbors or whoever that may need to hear it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to do our part, because we can't hope that the media is going to do theirs.
Right.
That's not for it. But we can try to do our part to make sure that it's consistent and they're constantly being reminded that we need to do this, especially the people who have power to change things. So I think it may be temporary in the eyes of the masses, but I think if we want to make change, we have to be consistent in our efforts and not go back to like allowing this stuff to continue to go on and not pushing the agenda.
I would like to ask you, what other things can be put in place to make sure it's consistent? At least any ideas that you have yourself.
Consistent on what front? Like media or?
I would say in all realms, bro. Like any way possible. Like if you go into, like, for instance, again, going back to Kwame Ture, bro. If anybody knows anything about Kwame Ture, the man says organize, organize, organize. Like he says, like, if you're in some organization, you need to hop in some organization. Like it doesn't matter what it is, hop in it. Because he talks about the NAACP. He talks about SNCC. SNCC turned, that was just Alabama, but he talks about his All African People's Revolutionary Party. He talks there's a lot of orgs that are out here, or even orgs that have yet to be created. What is there that, do you have any ideas? If not, it's cool. But do y'all have any other ways that we could possibly continue this quote unquote trend? Like, how do you?
I got ideas for sure. Like, well, first the conversation we had a conversation about voting. Like, one, voting should count for something. Like, the vote shouldn't be suppressed. It should count for something. But like, that's the first step. Two, we got to hold people accountable to what they said on their campaign versus what they're actually doing. And three, if they're not working out, we have to do it ourselves. So we have to be organized to do stuff like that. But definitely staying organized. I think like it was the group that was out there on Stone Mountain, like that's out there with rifles and stuff. Whatever attracts you, whatever group attracts you, and whatever you want to get behind to push forward a positive cause and trying to fight for justice. I think you should get behind that. And I firmly believe that money talks. Like, I don't know if any of y'all worked on the Hill or met a congressman or somebody, but if you really if you spend days with them or just look at their schedule, they really are listening to the people they see the most, they staff and like the lobbyists and the people that are in their pockets who are helping them campaign. Because American politicians have to campaign, they have to fundraise. So who are they getting their money from? And if it's not you, they're not really gonna listen to your opinion. I'm sorry, but like that's most of the facts. So I feel like even with your black dollars, with black businesses, like all that, where you spend your money, what representative you support, even if it's you, like supporting yourself, supporting roots, and like just really figuring out in every way, in my money, in my thoughts, and what I put in on social media into the world, like how can I make sure that I'm trying to build up my agenda or forward the agenda of like equal justice and like parity for all of us.
I agree. I think one way that I see myself doing it is, through the form of education, and a lot, kind of like what Ta-Nehisi is doing in this book, is like making these things real and apparent for people. And I think that comes through learning about it. And if that's something that we can pass on to the next generation, like this awareness of the world and the awareness of humanity and how people should be in a society with other people, I think that's one way I can continue to like combat.
What you touched on, Marcus, when you talked about our politicians and holding them accountable for what they say they're gonna do in their campaigns. Again, going back to Kwame Ture, if y'all get a chance, read some Black revolutionary books, bro. He put a quote. I read this last night. He said the political and social rights of Black people have been and always will be negotiable and expendable the moment they conflict with the interests of their allies. He goes on to talk about a mayor of Chicago back in the 60s or the 50s. He doesn't have the date on here, but the mayor's name was Mayor Daley, and he was in the Democratic coalition. And he talked about how he did a lot of things as far as street cleaning, street lighting, road building, and a new airport, a convention hall, which all looked good. They were visible. They were visible things we could see that he did. They didn't take that much. They didn't take them to increase the taxes that much. It was more about reallocation of money. But then he said the mayor's program conspicuously neglected the goal of militant Negroes, the demands of the enforcement of the building codes. He didn't do. He didn't. He said until there was dramatic expose, what we're going through now, until there was dramatic expose, complaints about police inefficiency and corruption were neglected. And this made me also think about Mayor Keisha Bottoms, today. Again, like I said, when you actually start diving in this, you start seeing these things that were very repetitive. So again, Mayor Keisha Bottoms here in Atlanta, going back to something that's recently been exposed, but it's also talked about in Angela Davis's book, Freedom is a Constant Struggle. She talks about our full-on connection to Israel oppressing the Palestinians there, and how their police and military train our police, like even here in Atlanta, Georgia, but all over the nation. But here in Georgia, they specifically have a program where they are exchanging ideas and they're training our police on how to be militant towards us. They have the same exact program. And I related that because someone mentioned how the mayor Keisha Bottoms actually in her campaign said she was going to do great things for us, and to kind of put this program like that, like I guess not to enhance this program's progression. And we see that she said this in 2017, but now we're in 2020 and it's still ongoing. So this is a perfect current example of how history is important to our current situations, where this is just another politician that said things but has not come into fruition on the promises that they made. And this is somebody that is black, this is somebody that you would, and fun fact, they also in the D9, like we're supposed to be uplifting in the D9, Marcus, what you got, man?
Well, one thing, I'm not trying to cop her out or nothing, but one thing when I think about that is too, like, who does she work with? Like, who does she have to fight against to get that actually pushed through? Because cops got power too. Like, I mean, you look at the unions and blah, 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 like they are well organized. They have packs, like they have their money in where their mouth is. Like, so it's kind of like fighting against that. And also, like the media, and we talked about this recently, like the media is going to put out the dramatic story. They're going to put out what catches eyes. I mean, anytime somebody say, oh, that black person, that so-and-so didn't do much for me, I mean, I just say, like, go to their website and see what they say, what they brag about, because the news isn't going to, like, post it. They're not going to talk about this day on day, like, oh, this person passed this that disproportionately hurts black communities. They're not going to talk about that. So it's like our information stream isn't coming, telling us the stuff that's important to our community all the time. So it's like you got to watch where you're getting your information and be deliberate and getting information about that kind of stuff to hold people accountable. But like, if you're right, she hasn't done anything about it. Why? And she why? And then correct that. You know what I'm saying? If she needs help her, I guess. But I feel like it is important. And like you said with that mayor, like you have to show dramatic things to get things done. Like at this point, I don't care. Like we can do whatever. like long as something getting done. But like you're right. Like she could be another black person who just using the black votes to get, where she wanted to be. But at the same time, we don't know that for a fact because we don't get all the information that we need.
Touching on what you just said, though, real quick, Kemp definitely showed his power. And when she said we're going back to phase 1 in Atlanta, and then Kemp responded saying, "No, Keisha, you don't have that power." So yeah, she definitely does have to deal with.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, we got to vote more. Like, you can't just vote for the mayor or the president. Like, you gotta vote for everybody. And that's what I'm saying. Like, for these local positions, if you feel like your sheriff is shitty, like, get it together, organize so somebody can run, like somebody who can relate, somebody who wants to police based off of community, or at least somebody who feel like they know you, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these positions of power are attainable to the citizens. It's just who's delivered enough to do it. We've been so detached from the system because it never worked for us. Like, it never worked for, it's never set up for us it to work for us. It works against us. So we have to really, I'm not saying like we have to, it's fine as it is, but we have to change it by changing the people in it too. Like the judge, the prosecutor, all them folks, like them folks could be black. They could be on your side. You just don't know. But the more people that get in there that are actually want justice the right way, the better. But we have to take initiative. Like we have to respect ourselves and aspire to actually help in different ways than just saying something. Sometimes, like, you might have to take that position.
I think, not only do we need to get different people in there, but we have to get people in there that are going to change policy. Because I think, even just relating this back to the book, the cop that killed his friend Prince Jones, it was a black guy. The cop was black. So it's like, even if we have a black cop, if we got black cops, are they still going to do the role that's mapped out for for police officers to do? And it seems like they will. That I think, there's statistics that show like a black cop is more likely to shoot a black person than a white cop is. And I think that just shows to like the system working exactly how it's supposed to. Whether you're black or white, as a cop, you're going to disenfranchise people of color. You're going to criminalize people of color. So I think we need policy changes. Well,
we need policy changes, and we need, honestly, the grand jury. Like when they said the grand jury didn't indict whoever the white man name is that killed Mike Brown, like who the hell get the grand jury together? Like all that kind of stuff. I be questioning, like, who are these people, bro? Because
elementary.
What'd you say?
I say it seems elementary. It doesn't seem like. It's like when I see people arguing all lives matter, I feel like it's almost like you're arguing with a child.
It is.
Sometimes, it seems irrational, a lot of their arguments.
It's because it's out of fear, like the fear that, like, oh, I'm a bad person. Like they want to exonerate themselves again. Like, oh, all lives matter though, but like they don't. Like they think they right because in their mind, America is great. The dream is real. Like black people are doing great things.
It's that color.
How do you get them out of that?
You guys made so much progress,
Yeah. But
no, go ahead, Marcus, because I was about to switch the subject.
I got my thought. That's why I was frustrated.
So I want to hit on Haven's question a little earlier that she asked, which is, do you feel as though you have any family members or close ones who have properly passed down their advice, experience, and knowledge to you or the younger generation?
Yeah.
Y'all feel like y'all have anybody in y'all's lives?
Okay, I'll go first. I'll say I'll relate a quote from the book to this. He said he loved Malcolm because Malcolm never lied. Unlike the schools and their facade of morality, unlike the streets and their bravado, unlike the world of dreamers. I loved him because he made it plain, never mystical or esoteric, because his science was not rooted in the actions of spooks and mystery gods, but in the work of the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna stop it right there. I actually quoted the whole dang thing, but I'm gonna stop it right there because and tie it into what we're talking about. Because for me, like my first Malcolm was Tupac. Like I love Tupac, and the reason why I gravitated so much to him is because nobody else was speaking to me like him. Nobody else was telling me that truth. So to answer that question, I'll say no. I'm doing that for my little cousins now. Like my cousins, they're picking up on it too. They're repeating it to those other little cousins and everything. Like we're just now, like I don't have a single uncle that's told me about how fragile my body is. There's never. I talked with someone a few weeks ago at my cousin's graduation party. where I told him that I've never really had these conversations even with my dad. So I've never now I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, yo, when we gonna have these conversations?
Mhm.
Like recently he just not told me, like, you know what to do when you see a cop, right? And I'm like, dang, I'm in my 20s now. Like, shoot, we should have had when I was getting pulled over when I was a teenager. Like I so to answer that question, I've never had someone pass this down, which is why I read so much now. So I know nobody is gonna pass it to me unless I go searching for it.
I have my dad. Earlier I mentioned that my dad taught me about race when I was in school, bro. I went to Brown Elementary and I was talking to his kids like, "Oh, I'm black, you white," and he was like, "What are you talking about? My skin's not white. This color is not white." Like, because they thinking about the literal color, but they don't even understand that. So that's literally how it feels to be black in America sometimes. Like just a little bit of woke, but yeah, my dad has like he's always been frank and honest about like, man, this is really what it is. Like he's not preaching, but it's like you hear him and you understand like, well, I think you gather understanding over time about what he's talking about. But he has, but I understand not everybody has that. And like with the system itself, like they're pushing women to raise their kids on their own and blase blase. Like the household has been broken since 1600, 1700. So it was like having a household broken. It's hard for one parent. It's hard to parent in general. It's hard to be the only parent. And then like you're really just trying to think about survival. I feel like a lot of families are, especially when you lower income or you poor or whatever. But even when you get into the suburbs, you just think about survival. You're not even trying to think about, the existential reality of so and so. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't even get that deep. And I mean, sometimes I feel like it's that like that's that survival mode that prevents parents or people to think about it. And one thing it may be trauma, pain, fear, anxiety, like addressing the fact that like your child may not be worth anything to anybody but and trying to tell them that like they'll break your heart. Like it's hard to say. Like a lot of people aren't good at having tough conversations. Like a lot of families, put the truth under the rug. If something happened, they don't really talk about it. Like so I think it's difficult. Like I understand, but I think we have to have tough conversations. It's too many problems for us not to address it and have these tough conversations. We gotta if the kid's not gonna get here from their parents, they can hear it on YouTube from this. They can pick up the book themselves. Like you just got to put it out there. But I mean, I just feel like it hasn't been given to a lot of people, and it's for numerous reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
Personally, I feel like not directly, not in the way I needed it to be growing up. I definitely had people in my life that, steered me in the right directions and had my best interests in mind. But it was more surface level. So, from my parents, it's like, don't do these things, like, stay clear of the police, or, act right in school, or, you know, people want to steer me in the right direction, but I wasn't taught about, like, I was talking about African American history, but I wasn't really taught about my culture. I wasn't really taught about like black leaders or black people I could look up to. I wasn't taught about like black revolution, how I needed it to. Um, so I think I had people in my life that tried to steer me in that direction throughout life. And, my parents never really talked about what it meant to be black or like black power or these type of things. But, I think my parents are also, just trying to make ends meet and make sure I'm not dead on the corner. So I can't really blame them.
Yeah.
So I think for me, those teachers for me were people that I found on my own, and they were truth speakers that I found and gravitated to, and I gravitated towards that truth, and through people like Malcolm X, through people like even truth. One person who I felt like was a truth speaker to me was Dr. Sebi. Dr. Sebi is somebody that opened my eyes and changed my life. So, it's through people like that that I found on my own is where I really feel like I've been taught.
Yeah. Oh, you about to
Go
say?
through a couple people's.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what
I just want to address Haven's thing. She said Ta-Nehisi repeats the theme of the dream and realization that the dream he hoped for himself was something rooted in the breaking of his body. I feel like that was something very thought provoking. I think like the realizing that the breaking of your body, that like in this society in America you're at the bottom, is like one of the hardest things to like stomach. Like I feel like it does something to our psyche, and I feel like it's the direct cause of a lot of our strife within ourselves and within our communities. It's like we at the bottom, so what does it matter? Like none of this stuff matters. Like even with he was talking about his days back in Baltimore. Like he looked at the guys and they would wear the clothes, the chain, the fitted, whatever it was, the Timbs, and it was again they were trying to give off the perception that everything they needed or wanted they had right there, and it was like trying to have some control over their body or have some control over their reality when they really don't. But I think he said a lot, like a lot of stuff he said made sense to why we do some of the things we do, and we resent those things because you're like, why are you doing it? Like you look so stupid, but it's us trying to like make sense of this world we live in, where we feel like our body is worthless.
Yeah, and have some type of control over, where we end up in life.
Yeah. Or where does your life end?
Yeah. I wanted to touch on or read Chanel and Mike's comments as far as their family members. Chanel said, I have family members that have passed down knowledge, but it's always been the same types of things learned in school, which is a biased view. That's true. Mike said, I feel like my parents do their best, but it's hard to see the relevance of their lessons until you've lived it. Facts. Sometimes that moment never comes, or when it does, it's too late. That's real. That's real.
Yeah. I feel like I can relate to Mike because I'm one of them kids where like I learned from my big brothers a lot. So they got in trouble. They got the beatings. I was like, oh, I ain't gonna do that. I was the best kid in the house, bro. But I forget what the quote is, but it's like the wise learn from other mistakes. Like smart people learn from their mistakes, the wise learn from other people's mistakes. And like that and like other different things like that, I'm gonna try like those are the kind of things I want to tell my kid when they 5 and they ask me all kind of questions like learn these things, and then that way you can always think for yourself and figure it out versus like me having to tell it to you later. And like sometimes they don't really relate to like kids don't really get it. Like I know like me and my dad just had a conversation and it's like yeah, like you be telling me stuff and I say I get it, but you don't really get it, you know? You just gotta take your parents' word for it. So
I'm actually about to post that quote that you was talking about in the comment section. But I like that quote. I say a lot too. It's like only a fool learns from his mistakes. The wise man learns from mistakes of others.
yeah. And it's like America's fool, damn fool. Like we been doing the same stuff. We not wise, we not great, bro. We've been doing the same mistakes for so long.
Yeah, we got a short-term memory, man.
I think that's the importance of us keeping our history relevant.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's not relevant in books at all.
I believe we talked on this on one of our Wednesday discussions because when we talked about how COVID might have been, it has a silver lining to it. It's a travesty. However, it took away the entertainment. So most of the time, when stuff like this would happen in the past, if it was so far in the past where we didn't have social media or TV like we do today, you never really saw it. So there's a lot of stuff out there that I'm digging and finding. Like I recently found out in Valdosta, they actually murdered a pregnant woman right after they murdered her husband, just because she was complaining about them murdering her husband, and they ended up hanging her upside down, cutting her stomach open, letting the baby drop on the ground, and all. Like you don't hear about this stuff. So again, like what we see today, when we're like, the only reason Ahmaud Arbery was brought up was because it was on camera. That's the only reason they arrested them. Like how many of them haven't been shown? How many haven't been portrayed and of given light to for us to even see? And then even the ones that were given light to, how many people actually was like, okay, I'm gonna turn to Sunday Night Football. I'm a turn to Grey's Anatomy or The Bachelor or whatever. Like, what you got to say, man?
I was thinking like the silver lining of George Floyd, like his daughter saying like my daddy changed the world. I think that video, I haven't even watched that video. I'm gonna be honest. Like I think that people see that video and then they have an emotional reaction. Like you can't help
Floyd's like the actual murder.
Actual video, yeah, the actual
of it either, bro.
I can't watch it. Like we haven't seen it enough, but we we've internalized so much other stuff. I feel like it's not necessary. Like I get the point; it should have never happened. But I feel like a lot of people are like watching this stuff and like having that emotional response for the first time. Like, what the hell? Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, and then people still go back and use he was a criminal to justify all that. But it's like in this situation, does it being a criminal or not matter? Is the police judge and executioner, or is he just the police, the enforcer, to bring you to justice? Like,
Exactly.
like, what are you actually saying? That's why when people talk about say certain things, I just go back to values and like, if you have certain values that are messed up and we're not on the same page on those, then I can't really talk to you about it. But I have to question those before I question like what you're saying. Like at the values are the why, and we don't ask the why enough. Like when your parents tell you stuff like, "Oh, why do I have?" Like you don't ask like, "Why do I have to like roll all the windows down when I get pulled over by the police?" You got to ask the why questions.
When you mentioned that before to me, bro, that helps out a lot, bro. Like you don't need to waste a lot of your God-given breath on people that have values rooted in superficial dreams. It's like if you don't even care about somebody's life, you don't value a life. I don't know how to talk to you, man, because I don't know how to make you care about somebody else. I don't know how to make you humane.
All right.
What about you, Jalen, man? Like, what's your thoughts on like as far as the silver lining or like if
COVID.
yeah, like
I think that it kind of made people have to sit down and pay. It was just too hard for people to escape. Because I mean, you can't do but so many things throughout your day while you're sitting at home. So you're gonna turn on the TV, you're gonna go on social media, um, and I think that social media did a great job of covering all the events. I think that video was, I mean, it's nothing different than any of the other videos of killings of black people, but I don't know, man. It's something about just looking into that cop's eyes and how he was staring into that camera with his knee on his neck. That was just very eerie, very eerie. And the fact that he could look into the camera like that and almost emotionless, and continue to do it. I think that drew a lot of people to it. One thing I want to ask y'all about, because I think about this every time I read this book, is these poems that he has at the beginning of the chapters. And to see maybe if y'all have any type of interpretations of these poems. So maybe we just talk about the first one. So the poem at the beginning of the first chapter is, "Do not speak to me of martyrdom, of men who died to be remembered on some perished day. I don't believe in dying, though. I too shall die, and violence like castanets will echo me." Do y'all have any interpretation of that quote in relation to what he writes? Or what do you think he means by that quote in relation to like that first chapter?
I'm about to pull it up on the PDF now so I can actually digest it again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm not good with poetry. You got to be straight up with me.
I'm kind of the same way. I struggle finding exactly what he's talking about, but I don't know. Every time I read, I try to connect something closer to it.
Yeah, I feel what he's saying about like I don't believe in martyrdom. Like I understand that. Like we don't need martyrs. Like it shouldn't. Nobody should have to die for something to get done. You see what I'm saying? Like you don't have to.
Right.
I was talking to my dad in our video about COVID and how in Vietnam, not one person has died from COVID because they were proactive in a way. And I saw this on like a Vox video or something. I believe it's factual. You can double check it. But it's like in everything, in many ways, like America as a whole is reactionary. It's very superficial. So it's like, you had a black president. Now we got to have the complete opposite of him. Like his message got to be completely different. You see what I'm saying? Like it's always a overcompensation of what was immediately done prior. So I think that's a lot what happens now, like with the martyrs. It's like we've had enough of those. Like even for us, like Emmett Till should have did it for us. Like that could have been all of us. Emmett Till didn't make it to see our ages. Those images are gruesome enough. Like you've been to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and you see the pictures. You see him in his casket. You see that his clothes. Like that should be enough to say that like no matter who killed him, the fact that he had all this stuff done to him, like it's just completely like uncalled for. It's like, for lack of a better word, evil. Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It should be enough. There shouldn't have to be another dead black person, or another dead person, whatever color, killed by the police or whatever, and we use that to motivate us. Our motivation should be what's right.
I think he for me, what I connect at least the first part of martyrdom about, I think in this in this first chapter, he's trying to teach his son also the importance of protecting his black body against this violence, because he talks about not willingly handing over your black body to violence, and I don't know. I like you were saying, like how many Trayvon Martins is it going to take? How many Tamir Rices is it going to take? How many Khalif Browders is it going to take for them to, change criminal justice? I think he's saying that maybe martyrs, they do leave on a legacy, but you also are constant in this fight of trying to protect your body. Like don't just become a martyr. Like fight against this oppression. And I think that's part of what he's trying to say throughout this quote. But do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I was gonna mention Haven's comment. She says I kind of see it in the way where people say, "Don't say Malcolm X died for this. He was murdered." Like, don't romanticize the death, which is essentially what we do with martyrdom. Like,
Yeah.
The I would say there's an interview out there of Tupac when I think it's either right after he was released from prison or it was one of the interviews while he's in prison. He's got his hair and everything, so it's around the prison time. And near the end he talks about where his mom tells him like she knows like how passionate he is for his people. He loves us. Like that's why he raps. His early rap was all about us and what we were going through. His mom tells him like, don't give your life to your people because they will use you up. And when you're gone, that's it. Like it's like you don't get to smell those flowers that you're trying to work for. Like you actually, if you give your life to this, and like y'all said, you mentioned all those names and all these people, and a lot of people they don't even want to be martyrs. They're really catalysts. Like George Floyd, he became a catalyst. The right wing radicals are trying to say he's a martyr. We never said he was a martyr. He didn't want to give his life up. He's turned into a catalyst. Like he got a full funeral, a show. He got a show, which was they want to make it seem like it was respectful, but it was intrinsically disrespectful that you have all those people there that didn't even know him. You made a show out of his death, his funeral, and that is something like we've turned our progression into something to be romanticized. I want to ask y'all like if y'all have anything you want to. I see we're touching on the hour and a half mark. Want to have anything you want to leave off with before we hop off? I know me and Jalen and the rest of the crew, we try to have something we take from each one of these discussions that we have and try to create a lesson out of it. What are we learning from our discussions? So we know that these aren't wasteful.
Yeah. I'm thinking with what you're saying, like the martyr, like the thought of like, oh, this person died for this, like that dies. People forget about that. But if you live on, people can't forget about that. Like people can't forget about what you stand up for. So if you're standing for something, I think we all have to be more consistent. I think I was talking about this earlier. Like it has to be consistent, it has to be organized. Like we got to persist through all of this trend and all of this wave to make it last long. And the other thing is I think we all have to remember, like we have the question values. Like if America wants to be great, it has to define what great is. So you have to question: All right, is people who die who are innocent or until proven guilty, is that okay? Like, is that what America stands for? Does America stand for like falsely and wrongly imprisoning people, detaining people who are innocent and just seeking asylum, or immigrate? What does America stand for? Like, how can America truly be great? What does it mean to be great? So we have to question that and persistently ask those questions and bring up the discussion of like what we're trying to do, what justice is, and like what freedom should be and what it could be in America.
I like that. What is great? What is this?
One thing I can draw from this conversation is just, I think for me it'll be the importance, when it comes the time for me to raise a child, the importance of teaching my kid what I didn't know about being black and what it meant to be black, and the truth of American history, teaching my child the truth of black history, and not lying to protect somebody, because lying to protect my kid could potentially put him at greater risk, by not knowing what's really out there to get him. So that's something I can say I've taken away from this first chapter.
For myself, from this discussion, the chapter, the book in total, we touched on educating, continuing it. And I would just have to say that for me personally, it's all about each one teach one. That classic saying, like, if somebody watches this, or if you're in the discussion, if you're in the chat right now, like you're looking, or anybody that you come encounter with, like, go out there and actually have these discussions for real. For like, I know Chapman's mentioned this before in like our chat in our fraternity before. He's like, yo, Zach don't really like no small talk. Like, what are y'all trying to get to? That's something that I feel like a lot of people start learning about me. It's like, I don't really want to talk about little things anymore, because I see how much time how much time we have. Like people like to say life is short, but it's really the longest thing you're going to do. However, I see how quickly that time can pass by. And if you don't pass on these thoughts, you don't have these conversations, actually look at some other young black youth and actually look at them as your family. Like, have some compassion and say, like, yo, what's going on with you, man? What's up with your life? Like, and then actually have some real conversations about what's going on in the world, and what you may have been reading or what you may have been thinking about, and pass on whatever you've learned. Cause I'm really recently realizing, like, out of everything that we read, like, if you don't pass it on, then what did you read it for? So for me, I'd have to take each one teach one. That's my thing from this, I guess. Well, so
yeah, I feel like that's a great place for us to leave off. Thank you to everybody that engaged. Thank you, Marcus, for coming in here. I think you added a lot of value and a lot of perspective to the conversation, and we'd love to have you back on here in the same way. We do discussions on Wednesdays that are kind of like more free form, maybe about something that's relevant, or maybe just a topic that we thought of and thought we could have an engaging discussion around, but all relevant to, like, black struggle, black power, black liberation.
You got a comment.
Yeah, we just got one from Adbor. You got to be intentional, and even if black folks have to really realize and understand what it means that we are black bodies, that we are the black bodies we see on TV. It's not pop culture up for opinions and debate.
Exactly. I like that, man. Join in next time, Agbor. I know you saw the link, dog.
Agbor chilling tonight, man. Agbor chilling.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Agbor, Haven, Michael, Chanel. Thank y'all for engaging with us. Y'all made the show awesome. And hopefully y'all took something from this, because I think the three of us definitely did. I enjoyed our conversation. And I think next week we should probably try to come back and hit the second half of this book. Talk through the second half and figure out what we're going to have on the reading list next.
Yeah. Again, like, comment, subscribe. Please pass this on. I know I post a lot. We posted on our stories on Instagram and everything, trying to get it out there and whatnot. But creating these type of think tanks are the only way you get to true progression. You know, realizing you have a lot of power within your individual self to create a coalition with others to move to actually create a real movement. You know, like don't just be a follower. Get into it. You know. But
I think that's great, bro. Let's leave off right there, man. Thank you again, Marcus.
yeah, appreciate it, bro.
Easy.